forces by not addressing this problem in this bill, and I ask everyone to consider this. This is a critical issue given little attention except by Mr. McKean and Mr. Smith. I ask that you do review that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Utah.
Continue to reserve.
Gentleman reserves his time. Gentleman from Florida.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to yield to my good friend from Ohio, Mr. Kucinich. 2 minutes.
The gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. This bill authorizes permanent warfare anywhere in the world. It gives the President unchecked power to pursue war. It diminishes the role of this Congress. The Founders saw Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, which places in the hands of Congress the war power as essential to a check and balance against executive abuse of power. This legislation diminishes Congress's role in that regard. This legislation authorizes the military to indefinitely detain individuals without charge or trial, including the detention of U.S. citizens on U.S. soil. In short, what this bill does is it takes a wrecking ball to the United States Constitution and gives enormous power to the government or the state. I want friends on both sides of the aisle to understand this. We're giving the state more power over individuals with this bill. It's the wrong direction. Our children deserve a world without end, not a war without end. Our children deserve a world where they know that while their government will protect them, that it's not going to rule over them by invading their very thoughts and going, as the Patriot Act does, into their bedrooms or into their banking records or into their educational records. We got to keep the government out of people's lives, stop the government from getting more into war, which gives the government more control over people. This is a time we take a stand for the Constitution and a stand for a government which is smaller when it comes on matters of war. Thank you, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from Utah.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
In the year we have been here discussing these things, we have talked a lot about budget problems that we have in this country. It's my contention that our budget is not just that we have been spending too much, but we have been spending on too much. One of the things, though, that we should be spending is, of course, military issues. Article 1 of the Constitution clearly states that the defense of this country is a core constitutional responsibility. And for that, there must be government workers who are required to do this. That is what it should indeed be. Unfortunately, we have a president and administration that has decided that there should be some financial restraints on this particular area. Indeed, it means reducing spending significantly on the military, not necessarily other areas. The result of this will be, as has been shown in testimony, that we will create an army smaller than any army we've had since World War II, a Navy at its smallest since World War I, and an Air Force that is smaller and older than at any time in this country. And to do that, there will at least be 100,000 uniform jobs that will be cut, destroyed, and reduced. There are some people that think that simply cutting a few soldiers, a few airmen, a few sailors will be an easy solution to this issue. That is naive. It will not happen. What it means, though, is that means also programs must be cut at the same time. We have acquisition, which buys new materials for our soldiers, and we have sustainment, which fixes it. That means in certain situations our maintenance and sustainment side will have even greater requirements of them because of the decisions the administration has foisted and we will be making in this and the appropriations bill to come later. For example, the United States has owned air superiority ever since the Korean War, and we take it for granted. Yet the F-16s that we fly to maintain that air superiority were flying at 150% of their design capacity when I was first elected to this Congress. And yet this is an administration that, even though we have that deficit, decided not to build any more F-22s and are delaying the F-35, which does produce and put our air superiority in jeopardy. You have to have a plane for an Air Force, and you have to have a boat for a Navy, and they cost some kind of money. And in each case, we will have the oldest equipment. That means when men and women go into battle to defend this country, we are equipping them with the oldest products they will ever have to protect themselves, and that old stuff requires massive maintenance if you're really going to do that. But what we are requiring to do in this particular budget, if we go along with the President's request for making bigger and bigger cuts in the defense of this country, is taking those civilian employees that make that maintenance effort, that do that sustainment, that make those equipment last longer than they were designed to last. We are taking them out of the picture. The end result for the massive cuts we are looking at in the military, both proposed by the Obama administration and if in effect they go into effect because of rescission by the failed super committee, will be anywhere between 100 and 500,000 civilian employees and this vital function, in this constitutional function, that will lose their jobs. And if you go to the worst case scenario, it may even be 1 million employees. Now I mention that specifically because we have heard often and often, where are the job bills? This House has passed a number of job bills to promote private sector growth. Yet at the same time, we now have a situation where indeed the right hand does not know what the left hand is doing. There are those out there who are going around saying that we have to pass, and they are pillaring this Congress for not passing much bigger and bigger spending to create more and more government jobs in areas which is questionable if we should be there in the first place. But at the same time we are being pillared for not doing that, we are being presented by the left hand with a proposal that will actually cut existing civilian jobs in areas where we are constitutionally required to have them and to maintain them. If we don't find that at least inconsistent and mind-bogglingly inconsistent, it is one of our problems in not facing the reality. We are always taught, pass more government jobs. At the same time, the same people who are demanding that are saying, okay, now in this area, cut more government jobs. There is no consistency with that. And the sad part is the left hand, the one that is defending this country with the needs of the military, which is our constitutional responsibility. Those are the ones which are appropriate, and those are the jobs that are needed, and those are the jobs that are not being protected in the future. We must make some decisions in Congress on what is significantly important to us, and this is an area in which we must make those decisions in the future. We must continue to talk about jobs. But we have to realize that if you want more jobs, you can't go about cutting the jobs, and unfortunately this administration is trying to play both of those ends, and it is unfortunate. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, after my good friend from Utah spoke, I guess I say, wow. Last night, I reminded him that military people are government workers also. Indeed I do, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume. And toward that end, when we talk about cuts, and my friend talked about passing on spending, I'm curious, when $1 billion walks away in Iraq and nobody knows where it went, I'd ask my friend to tell those soldiers at Fort Bragg, where President and Mrs. Obama have spoken to them today that are returning home, why they were in Iraq, and what is it that we protected by spending $1 trillion? Why is it we are sending money to corrupt governments? And somewhere along the lines, I think we will come up with some answers that we had enough money to spend, but we spent it on things that we should not have. Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to yield 2 minutes to my very good friend from New Jersey, Mr. Andrews.
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 2 minutes.
I ask unanimous consent to revise my statement.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, for many American families, they'll only be able to celebrate this holiday if they forget about the burdens of their daily lives. Some are about to lose their jobs. Others are about to close their businesses for the last time. Some are worried they can't pay for their health care. Others are worried that they're next in the layoff line. This Congress has an opportunity on this day to address those problems. Yesterday, the House took action on a bill that, frankly, isn't going to go anywhere to address these problems, and today's the day we ought to act on a bill that will. On January 1st, everyone who earns wages in this country is facing a tax increase if this Congress doesn't act, a $1,000 a year tax increase on the middle class. We should suspend that tax increase today. Many people will lose their unemployment benefits. They'll have no income, no check. And to those who say, well, they should go find a job, you should walk in the shoes of those who are in that predicament, because here's what you'd find. For every one job that's available in this country, there are 4 people looking for it. So failing to extend unemployment benefits is craven, in my opinion. On the 1st of January, doctors who take care of our seniors, our grandmothers, our grandfathers, our disabled citizens, will see a 23% cut in what Medicare pays them if we do not act by December 31st. Now, yesterday's bill was deficient in so many ways, but here's 2 of the real big ones. First of all, it attached extraneous provisions about whether to build an oil pipeline. Some people are for it, others are not. It doesn't belong in that bill. And second, a large way the bill was paid for was to blame the unemployed and to say we're going to pay for what's in that bill by cutting their benefits. That's wrong. What we ought to be saying is we can hold down the taxes. I would ask for 30 more seconds.
Gentleman's time has expired.
I yield the gentleman an additional 30 seconds.
We can hold down the tax.
30 more seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We can hold down the taxes of the middle class. We can fairly extend benefits for the unemployed. We can make sure our doctors will continue to see our seniors and our disabled people if we ask the hedge fund managers and the millionaires and the billionaires of this country to pay just a little bit more. We will give the House an opportunity this afternoon to vote on that bill. That's the bill we should be considering. If we do, we can then proceed immediately with passing this badly needed defense bill. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Utah.
Thank you. The gentleman from New Jersey is right. Yesterday, the House did act in a bipartisan way. Now it's up to the Senate to act, amend, change, anything except just sitting there and not taking action. I am pleased to yield a minute to the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Flake.
The gentleman from Arizona is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, today I rise in support of Section 1245 in the conference report of the NDAA. This would require what we hope are crippling sanctions on the central bank of Iran. These provisions, offered in a bipartisan amendment in the other chamber and approved by a unanimous vote, would severely limit the funding available to the Iranian regime to use in its pursuit of nuclear weapons. I introduced similar legislation as a standalone bill here in Congress, and we also wrote a letter encouraging the conferees to accept this language. I'm pleased that they did. There is no silver bullet when it comes to stopping the Iranian regime from acquiring nuclear weapons, but if there's any sweet spot where we can make a difference, it is with the Central Bank of Iran. And so I'm pleased that there's provisions in the bill, and I would urge adoption of that section all the way through the process. And I hope that this signals our intent, certainly, to ensure that Iran does not obtain nuclear weapons. I yield back.
The gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, would you be so kind as to inform us as the amount of time remaining on either side?
The gentleman from Florida has 10 minutes remaining.
Good.
The gentleman from Utah has 18.5 minutes remaining.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. At this time, Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to yield to my friend, the distinguished woman from California, Ms. Davis. 2 minutes.
Gentlelady from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is a positive bill for our military families, and when we move to the bill, I'm going to take an opportunity to address that. But while we're on the rule, I have to express my immense disappointment that still to this day, we as a Congress will not even bring to the table, we won't even look at the fact that if a military service woman is raped and becomes pregnant, she does not have access to an abortion procedure. Mr. Speaker, this is really an outrage. We say that we want to help our service women. We say that we are finally starting to treat them as the warriors that they are. And yet I ask you, how many women have to fight and die for our country in order to have the same rights as women sitting in federal prison? This is a slap in the face to all military women. They volunteer to train, they volunteer to deploy and fight for our country, and we repay them by treating them as less worthy than prisoners. Honoring women in our military means changing this policy and treating them with respect. Haven't they earned this? It's well past time to show them that they have.
I reserve.
Gentleman from Utah reserves.
Mr. Speaker,
Gentleman from Florida.
I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized for as much time as he may consume.
If we defeat the previous question, I'll offer an amendment to the rule to provide that immediately after the House adopts this rule, it will bring up the Middle Class Fairness and Putting America Back to Work Act of 2011, which extends middle class tax relief, unemployment benefits, and the Medicare reimbursement doc fix. I ask unanimous consent to insert in the text of the amendment in the record, along with extraneous material, immediately prior to the vote on the previous question.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I'm very pleased to yield to the distinguished lady from California, Ms. Hahn. 2 minutes.
California is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague from Florida for giving me this time. I want to encourage my friends and colleagues on both sides to defeat the previous question so that we can work together to pass a clean extension of unemployment benefits and the payroll tax cut. You know, yesterday the House chaplain began the day with a reminder that the holidays are a time of hope. And it is in that spirit of hope that Congress should embrace and put aside some of the politics that have darkened our recent discussions. Last night, my Republican friends passed legislation that, however well-intended, has no chance of passing in the Senate. It did not receive my vote because, like many of my fellow Democrats in the House and the Senate, I don't believe that we should be debating controversial issues as part of those extensions. If you believe that building a pipeline through the United States is a good idea, let's have that debate. If you believe that the EPA shouldn't regulate emissions from certain industries and machines, let's have that debate. However, those issues cloud the need for extending unemployment benefits to those who can't find work. And it clouds the benefits for American families that would get an extension of the payroll tax cuts. I want to work with my Republican friends to get this done. I know I'm new around here, but I think that means putting aside these other issues to debate them on their own merits. Let's work together in a spirit of hope, vote against the previous question, and let's come back to the table and do what needs to be done. Thank you. I yield my time.
Gentleman from Utah.
Reserves.
Gentleman from Utah reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would advise my friend from Utah that I'm going to be the last speaker if he's ready to close.
There may be another speaker coming down, but he or she is not here. So if you want to go, I'll
proceed.
I'll take him out.
Time will take care of itself. Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may.
Gentleman is recognized for as much time as he may consume.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the mad rush to get home for Christmas, we're delivering an early gift to those who criticize our country for failing to live up to our ideals. With this legislation, we're undermining over 200 years of constitutional protections. We are returning American society to an age when an all-powerful executive can command unaccountable power over people's lives. To codify in law the power of the President to indefinitely detain American citizens without charge or trial is an egregious affront to our nation's system of justice. Franz Kafka wrote about it years ago, and it has been known as Kafkaesque. 10 years after the attacks of September the 11th, 10 years of war, of runaway defense spending, of the Patriot Act, torture, and extraordinary rendition, and we are still responding to the terrorist threat with a knee-jerk reaction devoid of reason and common sense. This legislation says that our law enforcement agencies do not work, that our judiciary, our court system does not work. This legislation says that the President can alone decide who is guilty or innocent. I would remind my friends that Barack Obama may not be the President all the time, but no President should have untrammeled authority to determine innocence or guilt. It puts the lie to the judicial branch of our government and to the legislative branch of our government. This legislation goes too far. If the Republican majority was serious about having this body carefully consider our nation's defense policies, members would have had more than 2 days to review the more than 1,000 pages covering $600 billion in spending. I urge my colleagues to vote against this rule and the underlying legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Florida yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from Utah.
Thank you. Let me reiterate one more time.
The gentleman recognizes himself for as much time as he may consume.
I would be happy to recognize myself for as much time as
so
I
recognized.
Or even less. This bill has gone through regular order as no other bill has. It went through its committee in regular order and was passed out in an overwhelmingly bipartisan vote, 60-1. Came on the floor with 152 amendments to be considered and was passed out with an overwhelming bipartisan vote. Went to the Senate, was passed out in an overwhelming bipartisan vote, and the conference report was signed by the conferees in a clear bipartisan effort. This is one of those good bills that does authorize our military forces through fiscal year 2012, and it is significant. But I would like, in closing, to talk about one of the issues that I think was brought up, and brought up with some exaggeration to the content of what is there that deals specifically with military detainees. I want this very clear because both Congressman McKeon, who is the chairman of the committee, Congressman Smith, who is the ranking member of the committee, spoke at length in Rules Committee on this specific issue. They were asked about the issue. They addressed the issue. Let me make this very clear. Anything in this law that deals with retirees does not change in any way, shape, or form existing law. It does not deny anyone habeas corpus opportunities. That is not waived in any way, shape, or form. Let me quote from Mr. Smith, the ranking Democrat on the committee. When he said, when talking about different things, he simply said that there is possibility of indefinite detention without a normal criminal charge, but even if you do that, which once again the President said he won't do it, but even if you did that in certain isolated circumstances where it could be necessary under the law of war, even if you do that, habeas corpus still applies, which means you have to have a hearing in front of a federal judge to make your case under the law for why you have the right to detain this person. And to do that, you have to show there is a connection to al-Qaeda and the Taliban, and you have to show there is a threat that they present. So habeas corpus applies to everyone, whether they are a citizen, a legal alien, or a non-citizen. Habeas corpus still applies. It is very clear in both sections 1021 and 1022 that protections for American citizens are clearly stated in there. In the Senate, they added in 1021 the words, "Nothing in this section shall be construed to affecting existing law or authorities relating to the detention of U.S. citizens, lawful resident aliens of the United States, or any other persons who are captured or arrested in the United States." In 1022, it makes it very clear, before somebody can be detained, there are two standards which must be met. First of all, there has to be association with an armed force that is in coordination and acting against the interests of the United States, and not just membership, but and they have to have participated in the course of planning or carrying out attacks or attempted attacks against the United States or its coalition partners. Can't just go out and pick people off the streets. There has to be a standard, and everyone still gets habeas corpus rights in all of these events. Let me quote again from the law, from the report, the bill that we are debating and discussing and voting. The requirement to detain a person in military custody under this section, this power, does not extend to citizens of the United States, which means you can't do this kind of detainment against a citizen or a lawful alien of the United States. Only in this section and in both sections do you have to meet certain very restricted criteria which are not different than what we are currently doing. Which simply means, look, in past history of this United States, especially in some of our war times, there have been presidents who we jokingly say used to throw people in jail who were opposed to them. President Obama could still do that under existing statute, but he can't do it with this language in this particular bill. There are specifics that are for it. There are specific protections written for American citizens, specific protections written for legal aliens of the United States. It is only a very restricted authority and a very restricted power, and it doesn't affect habeas corpus. It doesn't change existing law. In essence, those people who worked in the committee on this bill have done a yeoman's work in coming up with a good bill. Those people who worked in the conference did a yeoman's work in coming up with a good conference report. This is a good rule, which is a standard conference rule. And with the only exception that we still must be very careful that if we follow the administration's advice and cut our military spending too much, not only are we putting our military in jeopardy and our equipment in jeopardy, but we are destroying jobs, which is what we don't want to be doing in this particular time period. I would urge everyone to vote for this rule, and I would urge everyone to vote for the underlying bill. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I now yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back his time. This gentleman moved the previous question.
Mr. Speaker, in closing, I would also like to urge adoption of the rule, the underlying legislation, yield back my time, and move the previous question on the resolution.
The question's on ordering the previous question on this resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, the ayes have it. The resolution
Mr. Speaker,
3-2.
I ask for the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. The members will record their votes by electronic device. And pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20, the chair will reduce to 5 minutes the minimum time for any electronic vote on the question of adoption. This will be a 15-minute vote.
The House passed the 2012 Defense Authorization Bill back in May. This is the conference report, the compromise worked out by House and Senate negotiators on Defense Department programs and policies for 2012, an agreement which bars terrorism suspects from civilian prisons. It also requires sanctions against foreign companies involved with the Central Bank of Iran. More about the bill in just a moment. This is a procedural vote, the previous question vote, offered by Democrats, and they are looking to offer Representative Levin's amendment to the rule, which would allow the Democratic substitute to be considered. This is a 15-minute vote. A vote on the rule is next, and the rule would provide for an hour of general debate. Meanwhile, over in the Senate today, the Senate defeated both versions of the balanced budget amendment, the Republican and Democratic version. Also earlier today, in the Senate, Minority Leader Mitch McConnell blocked efforts by Democrats to vote on a House-passed extension of the payroll tax cut plan, the bill that passed in the House yesterday by a vote of 234 to 193. The Senate continues discussing general speeches at this hour. You can follow Senate coverage on C-SPAN 2. Also from Capitol Hill today, we learned that Speaker Boehner has invited the President to deliver his State of the Union address, and that would be the invitations for Tuesday, January the 24th. 15-minute vote on the House floor, procedural vote on the Defense Authorization Bill. More debate ahead, and we get more details on the bill from a Capitol Hill reporter. Megan Scully of Congressional Quarterly joining us. She covers the debate on defense authorization, the conference report. How did the House and Senate negotiators resolve the issue of detainee policy?
They essentially accepted language that was in the Senate bill, the most controversial of which was a provision that would require military custody for terrorism suspects, foreign terrorism suspects. They've made some tweaks to address concerns by the White House, but which has threatened to veto the bill over this provision. But it's too soon to tell whether those tweaks are going to satisfy the White House's demand.
So the White House has not responded to the tweaks, as you referred to them, that have changed the bill.
Sure. They say that they are reviewing the final conference report, or at least that was what the White House was saying as late Tuesday. We'll see if they put anything out officially today, weighing in one way or another on the final bill.
Now, you write in today's CQ about an audit requirement being dropped. Why was it done, and what does that mean to the bill?
Well, getting to a full financial audit has been an ongoing problem for the Defense Department, which is one of only 2 federal agencies that can't audit its books. The Senate version of the bill would have required an audit by 2014, which is 3 years ahead of the current target date of 2017, and the goal that Secretary Panetta has set for the department. There was concerns, though, in the House and among Pentagon officials that codifying that 2014 date was taking it a step too far. Several department officials said as late as the summer that 2017 was still a stretch. So by putting 2014 into law, it might have been an unrealistic requirement for the department.
So the whole audit requirement has been dropped from the conference report.
The requirement still stands at 2017 for the date. The conference report does require the Defense Department to report back to the Hill on its goal of getting to an audit by 2014, but it's not set in stone.
What other program or policy highlights can you tell us about in the underlying measure?
Sure. Well, there are new sanctions in the bill targeting the Central Bank of Iran. Those sanctions are designed to force a potential economic collapse that would, then move the country, force the country's hand at abandoning its alleged nuclear weapons program. That provision has drawn some concerns from the White House as well. There were some tweaks made in conference, but that language has bipartisan support. It passed the Senate on a 100-0 vote.
What about in the House? When it comes up for a vote, the conference report, will it pass?
It is expected to, yes.
Megan Scully with Congressional Quarterly, an update on the debate today in the House on the Defense Authorization Conference report. Thanks for checking in with us.
Thanks for having me.
And back live on the House floor, procedural vote on that Defense Authorization Conference report. This is the previous question vote. It is a 15-minute vote, and we'll get a 5-minute vote on the rule itself following this 15-minute vote. And the rule allows for an hour of general debate. While this vote continues, we're going to take you to a conversation from earlier today with House Speaker John Boehner. Politico's chief White House correspondent Mike Allen talked to the Speaker about extending the payroll tax cut and unemployment benefits, also about the GOP jobs plan and the congressional agenda as they wrap up the year. This event is part of Politico's Playbook Breakfast series, and we'll show you what we can while this vote continues.
Those are capitals or Christmas trees on your tie there?
Capitals.
Okay. All right, now, Sherman here told me that you'll probably critique what I wear. I got a tie just for you. What do you think?
It looks pretty good.
All right.
You got the Christmas spirit going.
There you go.
You don't have a lot of things mixed up. It all matches. That's really saying something for a reporter in this town.
Okay. Now,
Fake nose.
he's taking it. So this year was a turning point. This year, more than ever, people in America think that the process here is broken. More and more members will say publicly that Washington is broken. You're the Speaker. Buck stops here. How much responsibility are you willing to take for that?
Well, there are really big issues that our citizens are concerned about. They're concerned about the economy, concerned about jobs, concerned about the future for their kids and grandkids. And as a result, the debate that happens in our country, sooner or later, all ends up in Washington, D.C. And a lot of these discussions are really pretty painful because we're talking about real change. If you look at this year...
This isn't the first time in 200 years that painful issues have come to Washington.
Oh, I understand that. But when you talk about the scale of change that's been talked about here this year, it's different than what we've seen in the 21 years that I've been here.
Okay. Yeah, that's very fascinating. How is it different?
Well, when you begin to look at our debt crisis, people have really more focused in on it this year than any year that I've been here. And for the first time in my 21 years here, there's been a serious conversation about dealing with the entitlement crisis. How do we save Social Security?
Serious conversation, but there has not been serious action.
That's right. But how do you save Social Security? How do you save Medicare? How do you save Medicaid? These programs are important programs to tens of millions of Americans. They're unsustainable in their current form. And as you begin to discuss these, it's change. The country is probably more divided than it's ever been. And so I'm not surprised that the American people are not thrilled to death with Washington, D.C.
So it sounds like you're taking no responsibility for it.
Listen, I'm just a regular guy with a big job. And my job is to listen to the American people, work with my colleagues to do what the American people sent us here to do. And if you look at the most significant change that's occurred this year, clearly it's all about spending. Up until a year ago, the discussion was how much more could Washington spend? How much more stimulus? How much more on this program, that program? Corporate welfare, giveaway programs. And the discussion all year this year has been about how much we're going to reduce spending. And we inherited a budget halfway through the year, reduced spending in last fiscal year. We're going to reduce spending again this fiscal year.
So one way you've done that is by eliminating earmarks. I think a couple years ago, if we'd said to this crowd that you really were going to zero out earmarks, they would have said you're on drugs. How have you made that stick?
Well, you know, almost 6 years ago, when I got into a race for majority leader, I began a more serious effort to rid this process of earmarks. And it was probably not the smartest thing to do in the middle of a leadership election.
What seemed to work out?
But it worked. And I've never backed away from it. I've never done earmarks in the 21 years that I've been here. I thought that it corrupted the process and believed that they had to go. We've been through a whole year, no earmarks. We've got a minibus, a big spending bill about to be passed, no earmarks. It's something I believe in. I think it certainly made my job harder, but it's the right thing for the country.
All right, now we have yet another cliffhanger at the end of the year here in a year of cliffhangers. When will your people go home for Christmas?
As soon as possible.
Okay. That's not going to be Friday, right?
I don't think anybody knows how this is going to play out over the course of this week or next week. I think it's important that we finish our work and we get members home. Listen, the House has acted on the jobs bill. We did it last night. And really, the President there's no serious objections with this. May not be quite the way they would put it together. But there are Democrat ideas in this bill. There are Republican ideas. And while we have our fights over issues and strongly held beliefs, the American people expect us to find common ground and move the ball down the field. And I think that's exactly what we have in this package. It's going to go over the United States Senate, and it's time for the United States Senate to act. Listen, my House colleagues, Democrats and Republicans, have heard all and more than they've ever wanted to hear about why the Senate can't do this and why the Senate can't do that. Well, guess what? It's time for the United States Senate to act, and they're going to act. Because we can sit here and stare each other in the face for as long as it takes, but they're going to act.
Now, before you came out, Sherman and I were talking a little bit about the sweeteners that are being used to get your...
early in the morning, I have to be putting up a Sherman.
To get your colleagues to go along with some of these, the Keystone Pipeline, the most notable one. In the past, you have...
Whoa, stop. The premise of your question had to put these sweeteners in there.
So you didn't have to? You could have one passage of a clean bill?
The President and Republicans have focused on jobs. And if you want to look at those things that will help create jobs and help create them immediately, the Keystone Pipeline could be no better example. The President says the American people can't wait. Well, guess what? They can't wait. Then as the Secretary of State said, well, you know, this Keystone issue in this bill creates an arbitrary deadline. The only thing that's arbitrary about the deadline is the President deciding, well, I don't really want to decide this until after the next election. Come on. We've had 3 years of studies. Everything's done. Everybody knows it's going to be approved. Why don't we do it and put 20,000 Americans to work? Another 100,000 Americans that'll be affected indirectly by the construction of this pipeline. So if it's all about jobs, then it ought to be about jobs.
Now, an objection on your side to the proposal for a millionaire surtax has been that it would hurt small business. NPR went out and they went to the House Republican leadership, they went to the they went to the Senate Republican leadership, House Republican leadership, they went to business groups that were lobbying. They couldn't find a small business that would be hurt by the millionaire surtax. Have you found one?
Well, I used to be a small businessman. I ran a small business. I paid my business taxes as an individual. I was a subchapter S corporation. I know exactly how this works. And I could rattle off a half a dozen names right here and now.
Okay.
I'm not privy to their tax returns, but I've got a pretty good idea of companies.
Just name a couple.
I've got a handful of companies in my district, friends of mine, who run small businesses, but they're set up as a subchapter S corporation and pay taxes personally. And if you want to tax those people, almost half of the so-called millionaires in America are small business people who happen to pay their taxes on their personal tax return. And it's if you ask them to pay more money, it's going to mean less investment back in their business. Okay. At a time when we're looking for more jobs. But I know who these people are.
In the spirit of the season, who's your favorite Democrat?
My favorite Democrat? I don't know that there's one favorite Democrat.
Tough to narrow it down.
Well, Dan Boren's probably pretty close, all right? We've been friends for a long time, traveled together, and somebody I have great respect for, and frankly, very sad that he's leaving. A good guy, somebody that I think is good for the institution. But, you know, it's interesting. I've been around town for a while, and, you know, I'm sure there's some people out there that don't like me. But I get along with members on both sides of the aisle very well.
All right. So to test that, I want you to say something nice about Leader Pelosi, something nice about Leader Reid, and you cannot mention their families.
Well, in the case of Leader Pelosi, we actually have a very good relationship.
Would she say that?
We tend to, I think she would. We tend to stay away from the policy issues, but as leaders together...
That's kind of a problem.
No, but as leaders together over the last 5 years, you know, we've got a lot of institutional issues that we have to work on together. And so whether it's campus security, whether it's a PAGE program, I get a long list of...
Those are not the pressing issues of our time.
I understand that. But you asked me about my relationship with her. It's very good.
Okay.
Now, on the policy side, you know, we have very different beliefs. And why would we want to ruin our relationship talking about those things that we might disagree about? All right? Just so you understand.
All right. Leader Reid.
Senator Reid and I understand each other pretty well. We're open with each other. We're honest with each other. He has a job to do. I have a job to do. And I think it's important for the leaders to have some kind of a relationship. Because, while he's got much different challenges than what I have, I've got my set of challenges. We've got to find a way to grease the skids to make the process work better. And so I've a very upfront, straightforward relationship with Senator Reid.
It sounds like a New Year's resolution. Are you going to do that better next year?
I'm going to maintain my good relationship with both of my Democrat colleagues.
Okay. Let's talk about next year. We understand that you're going to keep your foot on the gas on jobs. What's something you can, we're going to make some news here. Tell us something that you will pass next year that the President will sign.
We're going to, we've announced this, but we're going to move an energy infrastructure bill. You know, one of our infrastructure problems in America is the lack of a funding source. And as we've spent, 5 years stumbling around this issue, maybe 7 or 8 issues, trying to find a way to pay for America's aging infrastructure, to bring it up to speed, finding that new funding source has been difficult. And at a time when American people are still asking the question, where are the jobs? We know that if we expand American energy production, we'll put more Americans to work. We'll also generate more revenues, oil and gas royalties, which I believe can be a very good source of revenue to pay for infrastructure.
Okay, something the President won't sign, but that you believe would make the biggest difference in jobs. If you had the magic wand, if you had total power, what's the first thing you would do to create jobs?
I would have a regulatory moratorium for all of next year. The regulatory burden coming out of Washington is unprecedented. It has every employer of every stripe scared to death about what are the rules going to be tomorrow. And if I'm going to make a big investment in America, I want to know, all right, what are the rules are going to be? And the fact is, nobody can plan today because every agency of the federal government is in overdrive, producing new rules, new regulations that are frankly getting in the way of our economy.
Right. We know that in an election year, it's tough to pass stuff. What are you going to try to pass next year? What is your sort of personal agenda for next year?
Well, I do believe our energy infrastructure bill is important for the country. It will help create jobs and bring some certainty to an industry that's been battered over the last several years.
That's one. What else?
You know, if I have my wish list, since we're right before Christmas,
Santa?
I'd like to pass a large debt reduction bill. Our debt hangs over our economy and hangs over the American people like a wet blanket. And if you want to give people more confidence in America, you want to give people more confidence in our ability to create jobs, dealing with a $15 trillion debt that's hanging out there and the $50 trillion worth of debt that's coming at us has to be dealt with.
All right, so what would you start with in this debt reduction bill, this fantasy bill?
We've dealt with the discretionary side, not that there isn't more to cut on the discretionary side. There are some things there that can be dealt with. I think making sure that Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid are sustainable for the long term is critically important.
President Obama, you feel like, and you've been Speaker almost a year, happy anniversary.
Jesus, how about a little love?
You feel closer to President Obama than when you started, or more distant from him?
No, I think I feel closer to the President today than I did, than I was a year ago. We spent a lot of time together this year, talked a sufficient amount of time. We're very different people. Have very different beliefs about what the appropriate role of the federal government is, but we get along very well.
So what have you learned about how to work with him? Like, what is he like behind the scenes? Like, how do you work him?
Listen, I work with the President like I work with anybody else in this town. Up front, straightforward, no games, no gimmicks, just the way I do business.
Now, what do you regret about your relationship with the President?
Regret? Well, I think my biggest regret of the year was that the President and I were unable to come to an agreement on raising the debt limit and taking a serious bite out of our debt. I've spent more time working on that this year than any other issue.
Okay. Now, it's fine to regret it. Is there something you would have changed, or do you wish you'd pushed harder with your own people to get the $4 trillion grand bargain?
Whoa. Well, no issue with my people. We never got that far. The president would never say yes to serious entitlement reform. That was where this really broke down. Yes, he wanted more revenue.
Which your people would not go for.
No. Well, we never got that far. I told the President right up front when he wanted revenue, I said, Mr. President, I'll put revenue on the table, but only if you're willing to make serious changes in our entitlement programs, serious reductions in spending. And unfortunately, I could never get to the President to the point where he would say yes.
Okay, so it was totally his fault. You did not bear any responsibility for that falling apart.
Well, I regret that we didn't come to an agreement. But, you know, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink it.
All right. The Gulf Summit. You and the President beat the Vice President and the Ohio Governor, John Kasich. The President, take us behind the scenes. The President switched that up a little bit. There was a little surprise.
Oh, he sure did.
Okay, tell us that story.
Well, you know, the President called, invited me to play golf, and told me he was bringing Joe Biden as his partner, and invited me to bring someone with me. So, you know, I gave a lot of thought to who I was going to bring. I'll save you some of the stories. But I decided I would invite John Kasich. So Kasich gets in town the night before, and all of you who've dealt with Kasich know what I'm talking about here. I said, Kasich, calm down. Calm down. They're going to be more nervous than we are. So, you know, I spent all night getting Kasich in the right place, and pick him up Saturday morning. We go out to Andrews Air Force Base, and he's sitting in a car jumping around like John Kasich would normally do, trying to calm him down, get him ready for this. I said, look,
on this
they're
vote,
going to be
the
far
yeas
more
are
nervous
235,
about
the nays are 173. The previous question is ordered. The question is on adoption of the resolution. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, I ask for a recorded vote.
A recorded vote is requested. Those favoring recorded vote will rise. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 5-minute vote.
The House is voting on the rule for the 2012 Defense Authorization Bill, the conference report, the compromise version reached between House and Senate negotiators. Walter Pincus in the Post writes that the bill reflects the level of reductions in national security spending required under August's budget agreement. That was the debt ceiling agreement. He also writes that almost all the cuts were made in the Pentagon's core budget, with only $2.3 billion coming out of funds for Afghanistan and Iraq, and $1.2 billion from the nuclear weapons program. There's a vote on the rule. The rule provides for an hour of general debate, so that is still ahead. In the Senate today, they have voted on 2 versions of the balanced budget amendment. Neither of them passed. Also, Republicans or Democrats have blocked 2 Republican efforts to take up the bill the House passed yesterday, the extension of the Social Security payroll tax cut and the package that includes extension of unemployment benefits and more. That was blocked by the Democrats this morning, and Senator Grassley made a motion to take it up this afternoon. That too was blocked. It passed in the House yesterday by a vote of 234 to 193.
The yeas are 245, the nays are 169. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
Next thing, once we get a little order here, go